you want to run an exercise on how, if you were to start a business right across the street from your current business, a competing business right across the street, what would you do to put your business out of business? Operations is where it all happens. Sales and finance, those are kind of the sexy things where operations sometimes is underplayed and undervalued. But that is where the customer experience happens. That is where you get to separate your company, your product, your service offering from all the other competitors. So again, for this monologue, I'm going to reference my book, An Insider's Guide to Business, Secrets from an Entrepreneur's Playbook, available on Amazon. And again, all profits go to charity that supports mental health and suicide prevention. Chapter 8 is where I title it, Operations is Where the Best Excel. And it really is, because every time we have an interaction with a customer, whether it's business to consumer or business to business or even business to government, there should always be a seller profit. There has to be, because if there's not, your business isn't going to last very long. And a buyer profit. There has to be a buyer profit, meaning the buyer feels that he or she, the company, extracted more value than what they paid. So in today's world, we can't just have this scale that's equal where the price equals the value. That's not the way consumers buy, be it a business consumer or a consumer. The scale has to be tipped just flat out, way down, with value way outweighing the price. And the reason why is because things have gotten so efficient and the markets have gotten so efficient and the competition is so stiff, regardless of the industry you're in. You must provide exceptional value that goes beyond your price. And so when you're making and creating your product or your service and you're bolstering it and you're improving it, always consider that the buyer has to have a profit as well in their mind. In his or her mind, there has to be a recognized profit from that exchange where they traded money for your time, service, product, whatever it is, and they feel that they benefited as much or more than you do. And honestly, it should be even more than you do in their mind. And that will start a continual positive feedback loop. One of the things I talk about in this chapter is process mapping. Process mapping, if you're in operations, you'll probably know what that means. If not, let me just quickly explain why it's so beneficial for your company and for you and for your department. Process mapping is taking an entire process from starting with a raw material, let's say, to the collection of cash into a satisfied customer. And if we're in a manufacturing plant, that is going to be a very long process with lots of moving parts. If we're in an e-commerce, we just run an e-commerce site, that may be a much tighter customer mapping process. But we want to do that process because, and think of a blank wall, think of having a blank wall and a bunch of sticky notes. And you start with, let's say we're manufacturing a product that has 5 ingredients. First we place an order for this ingredient, then we place an order for this ingredient, then we have a quality check on each of these ingredients, and then we move each of those ingredients into inventory, and then we have a rotation of that inventory every 6 months or whatever it is. You can see how it can become quite extensive even for a pretty simple process. But the reason to do process mapping is a lot of times, and the reason I say this is because a lot of times we are building things into our process and we are process driven as a company. And we do it because, well, that's the way we've always done it, or, it's working right now, so why change it? But we could be we probably are adding cost to the process for something that the buyer doesn't feel benefits them, that has no value to the buyer. And more often than not, when you do a full process mapping exercise for any one of your products or any one of your services, from, again, beginning to collecting the cash and a very satisfied customer, most often you will find that there are many steps that can be eliminated that add zero value to it and won't be missed by the customer and will save you money. And if you take steps out, your process either gets contracted time-wise, which is just as good as making more money, or it gets contracted cost-wise, which means your expenses are lower and your profit goes up. And again, you don't have to reduce expenses by that much to double your profit, because every expense dollar line item that you drop goes to the bottom line. If all the other costs are fixed in nature and you're reducing some of those fixed costs, or you're reducing a portion of the variable cost, that drops. And if you're running a business that's 15% net profit, let's say, and you're able to squeeze 15% of the expenses out, you've doubled your profit. You've doubled your profit, even though you've only reduced it by 15%, because all that drops to the bottom. And so that's how powerful process mapping can be. And I go through that in the book. And of course, there's entire libraries written on process mapping. Another great exercise, and I'll leave you with this for operations. And this one's simple. It's fun, but it does make you think, and it makes your team think, is you want to run an exercise on how, if you were to start a business right across the street from your current business, or you were to start, depending on if you're in manufacturing or logistics or whatever it is, if you were to start a competing business right across the street, what would you do to put your business out of business? So if your number one job, I'm going to start this business, and my goal is to put my current business out of business, what would I do? If it were day one, what would I do? Now, the only caveats you have to remember is you can't just say the price is, 99 cents for everything if you're selling Rolls Royces. Yeah, that would put the Rolls Royce dealer across the street out of business, but you'd put this business out of business too. So that the hypothetical new business has to be viable, right? You have to have some real constraints around it that it's viable, but it doesn't have to play by the same rules necessarily, or really have the same constraints that are already built into your business, because that's the way they've been built over time. If it were day one and you could rebuild your business from the ground up, wave a magic wand, build it from the ground up, what would it be? What would it look like? How would it be structured? How would it be financed? How would it be capitalized? And how would you put your business out of business? What would you offer? How would you differentiate? How would you approach the market? How would you market? How would you sell? How would you collect cash? How would you buy, sell inventory? When you do that exercise, what you do is you identify all of the weak areas in your business, and you have a team do this. Don't do this yourself. This is definitely a team-based exercise. And you really want to create, if you want to do this the right way, is create two teams that both have the same assignment, where they're going to design a company that will put your company out of business. And these are people from your team that are going to do this. So they're going to know where the weak spots are in your business, because all of our businesses have weak spots. And we're constantly trying to shore those up. But every business has its weak areas. So when you do that exercise and then you whiteboard it afterwards, and you whiteboard all the findings, there'll be several aha moments where you realize, okay, we can actually change this in our current business for very low dollars or no dollars. It could be zero. I have some examples in the book where I did things with a business that I had that cost us very, very little, and added tremendous value to the buyer profit. They saw tremendous value in what we were providing by adding some things that were very low cost to us, but had a high value perception in the customer's mind. And the only way we identified those was to go through this exercise of, let's build a company that's across the street from ours, and what we do in that company to put our business out of business. Wow, is it an eye-opener? It's a fun exercise. It's a little humbling, but it helps you shore up those areas where a competitor who's not fictitious, who's not just doing an exercise, could come along and take away real customers and real money out of your pocket. So don't allow them to do that. Don't give them the opportunity to do that. Do the exercise yourself first, so that you can identify where those areas are, because operations is where the customer experience happens, and operations has to be on point for you to scale and grow your business. Hope that helps. Good luck. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.